AITA for refusing to share my late mother's inheritance after my wife filed for divorce. In the midst of grief came the blow. In the midst of the blow came the surprise. When her lawyer demanded half of the inheritance, mine simply smiled and handed over the documents that changed everything. My name is Nathan. When my wife tried to divorce me right after I inherited my deceased mother's fortune, she thought she was being clever. I never imagined the woman I built my life with would turn on me at the very moment I was most vulnerable. She believed she would take half of the inheritance, but she was wrong. She was about to find that out. I met Laura 9 years ago. We were in our late 20s, full of dreams, and trying to navigate adult life one step at a time in the bustling city. Our connection was natural. Conversations flowed, the chemistry was there, and we both wanted the same things back then. The first few years together were filled with those small, beautiful moments. I truly believed I had found someone who would stand by my side, no matter what, but not everyone shared my enthusiasm. The first time I introduced Laura to my mother, I could tell she wasn't very fond of her. My mother wasn't rude or disrespectful. In fact, she was as polite as ever. But after Laura left that day, my mother called me over to talk and told me something I never forgot. "I know you're in love, Nathan, but time will tell how this ends." She looked at me with that motherly gaze that has seen enough of life to notice things a son cannot. She did not accuse Laura of anything, but she made one thing very clear. "I don't dislike her, but you're my only son, and I need you to keep your eyes wide open." That conversation stayed with me, but at the time, I saw it as just a mother's concern. I thought she was being overprotective. I took her advice to an extent and did not rush into getting married. Laura and I dated for a few years before making it official, and when we finally got married at a small ceremony downtown, I thought we were ready. But now, looking back, I realized my mother had sensed something that, in my infatuation, I could not see. Even after the wedding, the relationship between Laura and my mother remained the same, cordial but cold. There were never any fights or arguments, just a certain distance. My mother was always polite, but reserved, the type who observes everything but only speaks when absolutely necessary. She never tried to meddle in our marriage. She respected my decisions, even if she did not agree with all of them, but she also never tried to get closer to Laura. There were no long chats over coffee or moments of affection between them. At the time, I thought it was normal. Not everyone becomes best friends with their in-laws. I believed that as long as there was no hostility, everything was fine. The first few years of our marriage were, for the most part, stable. We had the ups and downs of any couple, learning to live together in our small apartment, adjusting to each other's habits, figuring out how to build a life side by side. We fought, of course, but nothing serious. I had already been working a stable job in the corporate world for years. It was secure, with good benefits, but not fulfilling. I felt a growing urge to create something of my own, to stop trading my time for someone else's dreams. So, 2 years into our marriage, I made a risky decision. I quit my job to start my own digital marketing agency. It was not an impulsive choice. I had prepared, saved money, and put together a small team. For a while, everything was going well, but then one of my employees made a major mistake on an important project. It was a total disaster. We lost not one, but our 2 biggest clients. They terminated the contract immediately, and with that, the agency's main source of income vanished. Those 2 clients accounted for more than half of our revenue. When they left, it felt like the floor was pulled out from under me. I tried to stay calm and rebuild. I contacted potential new clients. I updated our business proposals. I looked for any opportunity, but none came close to filling the gap. The agency went into what I can only describe as survival mode. Technically, we were still operating, but without enough money to keep everything afloat. Every week, I watched the business bank account balance dwindle, and every night, I went to sleep knowing the numbers just were not adding up. After 2 months of trying to keep everything afloat, the stress started to invade our home life. The bills did not wait, the groceries did not buy themselves. I did my best to keep everything running, but it was not enough, and Laura was not handling it well. The patience I thought she had disappeared. She started to become cold, bitter, impatient. I expected her to hang on for just a little while as I tried to get back on my feet. I was not asking her to carry the burden forever, just for a moment. But instead of supporting me, she turned every day into a fight. Even when she helped with money, She made sure to bring it up constantly. She would complain for hours about how I had left a stable job to bet everything on a business that was crumbling before our eyes. And to be fair, I understood where some of her frustration was coming from. But what hurt the most was how she started to blame me, as if this was all my problem, as if I had dragged her into this mess just to watch her suffer alongside me. It was not just the money that created the cracks. The truth is, things between us were already changing. We were already going through a difficult phase before all these financial problems began. But when the money issues hit, those small cracks turned into holes so big we could barely see each other through them. We stopped communicating. The warmth between us vanished. We were no longer partners. We were just roommates sharing a lease. At some point, I realized I was running out of options. I had been trying to keep the business alive, alone, surviving week by week, hoping for some miracle. I did not want to ask anyone for help, especially not my mother. She had already done so much for me throughout my life. But pride does not pay the bills, and watching everything you have built fall apart piece by piece changes your perspective quickly. So one night, I got in my car and drove to my mother's house in the suburbs. I told her everything. How the agency was sinking, how I lost my main clients, how I tried to solve it all quietly, but just could not. I thought she would be disappointed or give me one of those "I told you so" lectures, but she did not. She just listened, nodded slowly, and after a few seconds of silence, she stood up, went to a drawer, pulled out a checkbook, and said, "Here, this should be enough to help you start over." She gave me $50,000 to restructure the company, hire temporary consultants, rework our proposals, and get the systems running again. It was not a magic solution, but it gave me breathing room. And in the following months, things started to improve, albeit slowly. I landed a few new clients. They were not as big as the ones I'd lost, but they helped stabilize the cash flow. I stopped waking up in a cold sweat, thinking the office would close the next week. I finally felt like I could breathe again. But while the business was slowly recovering, the marriage was not. And that was the hardest part. You would think that financial relief would bring some peace between us, but it did not. On the contrary, it only made it clearer how far we had drifted apart. Laura and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was all superficial. It was not a lack of time, it was a lack of desire. We were not making an effort anymore. We ate at the same table, but barely looked at each other. We slept in the same bed, but felt like strangers. Sometimes I would try to bring something up, but it always ended in short answers or silence. We both knew something was breaking, but neither of us had the courage to say it out loud. We lived like that for months, until one ordinary night, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was calm, but there was a seriousness to it I had never heard before. She asked me to come see her the next day. I knew immediately something was wrong. The next day, I went to her house, thinking maybe she needed help with something around the house. But as soon as I sat down, the look on her face made it clear this was not about a leaky faucet or grocery shopping. My mother told me she had ovarian cancer, and it was not a new diagnosis. She had been dealing with the illness for almost a year. It was in an advanced stage. The treatments she had been receiving were not working as hoped. The doctors told her it was time to stop thinking in terms of years and start thinking in terms of months. That moment shattered me. I just sat there, paralyzed, trying to process it, but everything felt like a blur. My mother was my rock. Ever since my father passed away 12 years ago, she had been the one constant in my life. Hearing that I was going to lose her was like hearing the ground beneath my feet was about to open up. I remember looking at her hands and thinking about how many times those hands had held mine through the toughest moments, and now it was my turn to prepare to let them go. The following weeks were some of the hardest of my life. I tried to keep the agency running, to keep my head up at work, but my heart was not in it. I was either at the hospital by her side, or my mind was trapped in that room, even when my body was not. Watching someone you love fade away slowly is something that words cannot describe. I would just sit there, holding her hand, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about anything and everything, because I did not know how to talk about saying goodbye. I told Laura what was happening, and at first, she reacted with sympathy. She said all the right words, but over time, I noticed how absent she was. She went to the hospital a few times, but that was it. When I asked her about it, she would say work was busy or that hospitals depressed her. I did not push it. The truth is, I had already accepted that she and my mother never had a close relationship. They were always cordial, even polite, but there was never any real affection, so I stopped expecting anything more than that. I did not want to fight while I was already drowning emotionally. 2 months. That is how long my mother was in the hospital before her body could not take it anymore. 2 months of watching the strongest woman I knew lose her strength day by day. And when she finally passed, even though I was expecting it, I was not ready. My mother always told me that when her time came, she did not want a fuss. No people traveling from out of state, no speeches or tributes. She wanted a simple burial, without delay, and I did exactly as she asked. The next day, I took care of everything. The funeral home, the paperwork, the service, everything in order. I remember standing by her grave, listening to the pastor speak, and thinking, how do you keep living when the person who taught you how to survive is no longer here to guide you? That was the beginning of a very dark phase of my life, a phase I thought I would face with my wife by my side, but I would soon discover she had other plans. A week after my mother's funeral, I received a call that took me by surprise. It was her attorney. He asked if I could come to his office when I had time. I scheduled it for the following afternoon. Walking into that office was heavy. I still had not processed the fact that I could no longer just call and hear my mother's voice. I thought the meeting would be about paperwork, maybe to sign something related to funeral expenses or closing accounts. But the attorney pulled out a thick folder and told me that before her health declined, my mother had restructured all her finances. She did not just leave a sum of money. She put everything into a trust. I sat in silence as he explained what that meant because, honestly, I had no idea. He then broke it down into simple terms. A trust is like a locked box that holds someone's assets. Only certain people can access it, and only under specific conditions. I was the only person named in the trust. No other beneficiaries. Everything she owned was there for me, but it was not money I could just take out the next day. She structured the trust with clauses that made it clear how much thought she had put into protecting me, even after she was gone. The most important clause stated that I could only access the full amount after a 3-year period of stability. Meaning, for 3 years, my life needed to remain stable, with no major personal disasters, especially no divorce. Furthermore, if I divorced during those 3 years, or was even in the process of divorcing, my wife would be automatically excluded from any access to the trust. Nothing, not a single penny, not through the courts, not by agreement, not by indirect influence. The money was completely shielded from asset division laws as it was not considered marital property. I remember sitting there, holding the folder, just staring. My first reaction was confusion. Why would my mother have taken so many precautions? Did she not trust Laura? Did she not trust me? Was she being overly cautious? Or did she see something in Laura that I refused to see? But the truth is, my mother was always private and prudent. She never told me what her net worth was. She never showed off. She never boasted, just lived discreetly and, apparently, planned everything the same way. I did not question her decisions. Deep down, I knew. She just wanted to make sure I would be protected, no matter what. I left that office feeling somewhat dazed. At home, I told Laura that I had met with the attorney and that my mother had left me an inheritance, but I did not mention the trust or the waiting period or the clauses. I thought it was not the right time, and honestly, I did not think it would make a difference. When I told her about the inheritance, she barely looked up from her cell phone. She just said, "Your mother was very organized." Maybe she did not know what to say. Maybe she was trying not to seem interested, but today, I know it was calculated. She was already thinking about the future. I just did not know it yet. 2 weeks after I told my wife, Laura, that my mother had left me an inheritance, I was served on a normal workday. I was in my office reviewing reports when a man walked in and asked for me. He was a process server. He handed me a sealed envelope and said, "You've been served." When I opened it, I felt the floor drop out from under me. It was a formal petition for dissolution of marriage. In other words, Laura was filing for divorce. The stated reason, irreconcilable differences. I sat there for a while in shock. Yes, things between us were not perfect. Communication had plummeted. The relationship was not the same, but we had not fought recently. There was no warning. No, we need to talk, conversation, just that document. That night, when I got home, I went straight to her and asked, "Why? Why are you filing for divorce without even trying to talk to me first?" She did not even flinch. She barely looked at me, just replied, "We've grown apart. Let's be adults about this." And then she turned and walked out of the room, as if she had already made peace with everything she had planned. I did not even know how to react. I just stood there, feeling like I was talking to a stranger. And from there, the divorce process dragged on for months. It was slow, draining, and felt like being trapped in an endless storm. During mediation, Laura came out swinging. Her attorney confidently demanded 50% of all marital assets, present and future. The key words were future assets. She assumed that included my mother's inheritance. I had not told her the details of how it worked because, honestly, I did not think it was necessary. I had not even touched the money yet. Everything was still locked in a trust, exactly as my mother had planned before she passed away. What Laura did not know, and what her attorney apparently never bothered to verify, was that my mother had established extremely strict conditions for that inheritance. And if I was in the process of divorcing during the stipulated period, my wife would be completely excluded, with no possibility, no argument, no loopholes. In one of the mediation sessions, the legal structure of the trust finally came to light. My attorney brought all the documentation and explained everything. He detailed how the inheritance was not part of the marital estate, how it had never been deposited into joint accounts, and how it was legally protected by the clauses in the trust agreement. I will never forget the look on Laura's face at that moment. She looked like someone who had the rug pulled out from under her. Her attorney skimmed through the papers, flipping from one page to another, and finally leaned back in his chair and muttered, "We need to reconsider our position." You could tell he was in shock too. They thought they had a solid case, but they had nothing. Laura had made her move too early and based on completely wrong assumptions. Her plan, if you can call it that, blew up in her face. In the end, the divorce was finalized, but without access to the inheritance. Laura was left with only what was actually in our shared assets, and by that point, it was not much. The value she received in the settlement was far below what she had expected to walk away with. In fact, most of it was eaten up by the costs of the legal process itself. Still, she was not satisfied. After the settlement, she lost her temper. She called me selfish. She said I was cruel, that my mother and I had conspired to ruin her. And I am going to be honest with you, I did not stay quiet. I replied directly. When I sat with the attorney and heard all those clauses in the trust, I thought my mother had gone overboard. I really did. But after seeing what you did here, now I understand. She knew exactly what you were capable of. She saw what I refused to see, and she protected me from it. That was our last real conversation. The divorce was finalized about a year after it all began. She went her way. I went mine, but it did not end there. A few months after the divorce was settled, Laura contacted me again. It was a text, late at night. A direct confession. She said she was drowning in debt and that everything was now crashing down at once. She said she did not know who else to turn to, that she felt trapped. And for a moment, just for a moment, I felt that old instinct pulling at me, that part of me that once would have moved mountains to help her. But I did not give in. I took a deep breath and replied, "I'm very sorry for what you're going through, Laura, but I can't save you. I truly wish you well." And I left it at that. Because here is the truth. When someone shows you who they really are, especially when you are at your lowest, you believe them. And when that person tries to profit from your grief, you do not give them another chance to do it again. That was the last time we ever spoke. Looking back, I am grateful for the red flags, for the pain that opened my eyes, even for the silence that came after. I am not going to lie and say it did not hurt. It did. I lost my mother and my marriage in the same season of my life. That kind of pain changes a person, but it also wakes you up. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.